When I was in my 20s, a friend invited me to come with her to laughing yoga, which is just as strange as it sounds. There is no actual yoga, there's just laughing, as much as you can, for about 45 minutes. The instructor had us lay down on our mats and practice laughing in different parts of the body. Big belly laughs, and chest laughs, and then nasal and face laughs, like It was silly enough that we all actually started laughing at ourselves and at each other. And yes, the instructor said, that is the point. Keep laughing, fake it till you make it, let's go. So for the next 45 minutes, I laughed until I cried. I laughed in all the different parts of my body. I hard laughed, and then the laugh died down, and then I fake laughed until I was really laughing again. It was actually a lot of fun. But I had no idea how transformative it was until the end of our session when our instructor had us lie still for a few minutes, and then he took out a giant gong. When he hit that gong and then he walked around the room with it, letting it vibrate over each of us, I felt the wave of the gong move through my entire body in a way that I had never felt anything before. It felt like peace and beauty and love and joy just moving through me, vibrating every single particle in my body and opening me up to the oneness of all that is. I felt connected to the air and to my body and to the other people in the room in an interwoven fabric of greater love and wholeness. And most importantly, I felt alive. Every single cell in my body felt like it was awake and singing. Years later, I learned that my body and all of matter in the universe is both wave and particle. Every single thing that we see around us that's material, like this pulpit and your seat, the order of service or the cup of coffee that you're holding in your hand, and your hand that's holding it, all of those things are both solid material and waves. For 100 years now, physics has understood that all of matter, all of reality, has particle-wave duality. Everything, including me and you, is both matter and vibration. Ancient practices, from Tibetan singing bowls to African drumming to Native American jingle dresses, have used sound as part of rituals for healing and transformation. Emerging scientific studies are confirming that sound and music do indeed have material effects on the body. The mechanics are still under study. But what is clear is that vibration moves through our bodies and affects them. Over the past few months, I've been thinking of the pain of hatred and discrimination and cruelty as waves moving through our bodies. In this past election, which had so many tenors of hatred and cruelty in it, the results moved through the body of the nation, hitting us like a gong, a ripple of pain moving across the landscape of our collective body. I think that this pain gong vibrated all of the sensitive places within, those places in our bodies that have been wounded in the past, that hold old pain, hold the ache of it, hold a trauma. It activated those parts and set us vibrating against ourselves and sometimes against each other. I've noticed a lot of relationships in struggle in the past couple of months, especially among people whose identities or traumas have been particularly hit by this pain gong. The wounds were, of course, already there. The trouble in the relationships already existed. But when that pain gong hit, it vibrated all of the trouble, the trauma, the old wounds at the same time that the world got a lot harder. Suddenly, not only was the outside stress increasing, but everyone's internal wounds got activated simultaneously. It's been a mess, y'all. So I just want to name some truths. First, beloveds, you are worthy just as you are. You are worthy of love. You are beloved on this earth. And we are so lucky and so grateful to have you here. Second, you are not perfect. You are not required to be perfect. Perfection is not a prerequisite for love. You are permitted to have flaws. Also, you do have flaws. We all do. Every single one of us has habitual errors that we make in the world, in relationships, in our minds, and our understanding of what is happening. Your job, my job, all of our jobs is not to not have these flaws. It's only to know what they are. Your job is to know your habitual errors, to be self-aware about what your patterns are and when they tend to come up, because they will, especially right now, and then be prepared to face them, own them, be responsible for them, and for the harm that they cause. And finally, your loved ones, they also have flaws. They are also allowed to have flaws, annoying as those flaws are. There is no such thing as the perfect partner, the perfect parent, the perfect child or sibling or friend. Our loved one's job is not to be perfect, any more than our job is to be perfect. Their job is simply to know what their flaws are and be ready to face them and own them and be responsible for the harm that they cause. This is all we can do. We mutually flawed and imperfect humans. We cannot have the perfect relationship because it does not exist, because perfect humans do not exist. We can only be responsible for our side of the street, the mess, the conflict, our part of it, when it inevitably comes, because it will, it has, and it does. We can also expect that the other person is going to be responsible for their side of the street. And if either person in the relationship cannot do that, if your loved one cannot be in relationship with your particular flaws, or if the other person in the relationship's flaws are too painful for you, if you're unable to work with or be present for those particular habitual errors, then it's time for boundaries. Those commitments that somatic practitioner Prentice Hempel calls the distance at which I can love both you and me. A couple of dear friends have been negotiating some post-election conflict with one another. Both were activated in the election, and fear and uncertainty about surviving the future came to include fear and uncertainty in the relationship. One of the people in this relationship has the habitual error of mistrust and self-isolation when under stress, while the other person has the habitual error of blame and criticism when under stress. Post-election, the mistrust and isolation person was feeling like they had to figure out every single thing on their own, while the blame and criticism person felt abandoned in their pain and furious about it. For weeks, each of my friends spiraled in internal fear and frustration, periodically snapping at each other about small things that were not the real problem. Eventually, they got to the real argument, which was hard, and it took up time and space in between work and family and the very real labor of daily life. It's so hard when your downtime becomes filled with conflict with your closest person or people, and when the scariest internal wounds are stirred up and in tension with your beloveds. As T.S. Eliot wrote in our opening words this morning, too many things are occurring for even the big heart to hold. So what do we do with the overflow, friends? In 1942, Lutheran theologian Reinhold Niebuhr wrote a prayer in response to fascism, asking for the wisdom of discernment to know where our locus of control truly lies. You might recognize this anti-fascist prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The Serenity Prayer is a petition. It's a lament and it's a longing all at once. It's interesting to note that it was part of Niebuhr's work in the 1940s to warn people of faith about the dangers of fascism. Tuck that little nugget in our minds for whenever it becomes useful. In relationships, our power, our locus of control is within. It is in our relationship with our own triggers, our old wounds, and how we regulate those triggers and wounds and show up with our loved ones. Unfortunately, my dear ones, our locus of control does not include the other person's behavior. The Serenity Prayer prays for the wisdom to know where the line is between what we can change and what we cannot. That which lies within, over which we do have control, includes our desire for our loved one's behavior to be different, our imaginings that our loved one's behavior could be different. It even includes our disappointment and our anger if our loved one's behavior is not different, but it does not include them changing their behavior. That is on the other side of the street. That is within their locus of control. On our side of the street, we can observe patterns of behavior. We can discern what we can and cannot accept, and we can create boundaries around that. We can clearly communicate our needs and our boundaries, but we cannot change the other person's behavior. It's a real bummer. It's also a very common place that loved ones circle when they are in relationship conflict. A healthy relationship between two adults is mutual. It includes shared trust and each person understanding their responsibility for their work with their heart on their side of the street. Both people can communicate their needs and their boundaries, but then we have to trust the other person to do their work. When we trust one another with the tender vulnerability of our heart in this way, it does not mean that we expect the other person to become our cardiologist. Healthy heart trust is about care, mutual care and trust, and is not an expectation that we become doctors who diagnose problems for one another and then fix each other's hearts. Fixing the other person's heart is not our work to do. I trust you with my heart means I know the technical work is up to me and whatever professional support I bring in for that heart care and vice versa, but in trust. We return to one another in deep mutual care and compassion. We show up to one another witnessing and honoring the internal heart work that the other person is doing, but we are not responsible for doing it ourselves. Too many things are occurring for even a big heart to hold. And so, dear ones, may we not hold all the things. May we instead hold each other with grace and compassion and even pleasure. That pain gong has been rung. Yes. It has moved through the collective body and vibrated the old wounds, but we are also capable of making our own song. We are also singers. We have our own gongs to ring, and on our own small scale, we can create a different kind of ripple that moves through the world. Love is what it's all for. And so when we're doing the big work of discernment and fighting fascism, we also need to turn towards one another in trust and compassion and love. We can choose to give each other grace in times of pain. We can be responsible for our own heart work, not expect our loved one to become our cardiologist. And in the midst of it all, even the hardest stuff, we can keep choosing beauty and joy and love and delight in one another and create beautiful ripples in the vibrational world. We can laugh hard at our own mistakes, laugh at the absurdity of all of this, fake it until we make it, laugh until we cry, laugh with one another, and delight until all of ourselves are vibrating and awake. We can choose love again and again, knowing it's not perfect, knowing we're gonna mess up, and so will our people, but trusting one another to return again and choose love and trust and joy and laughter. May it be so.